Okay, so this is a presentation on input and output in computer architecture. And these are my group members. So, input and output in computer architecture refers to the way a computer system communicates with the outside world. So, it refers to how input and output communicates with computer systems in the outside world, which could be human users or other computers or external devices. So, input means data coming into the computer system for external devices. Output means data being sent out of the computer system to external devices. So, examples of input or output devices. We have input devices. We have keyboard. We have the mouse. We have the scanner. We have the microphone. Output devices. We have the monitor. We have printer, speakers, and then when you talk about the both, we are talking about USB drivers and network cards. So input and output in computer architecture. Now, the CPU, the memory, and input devices are the three main components of a computer system. So when we talk about the main component of a computer system, we are talking of the CPU, memory, and input or output devices. These are the main components of a computer. So the CPU processes data and the memory stores data. So the CPU is used to process data. So whenever you input a data, the CPU is what processes the data that has been inputted into the computer system, and then the memory stores data. So if for example, when you input a data into the computer system and you want to store that data, the memory is for that function. Input or output devices provide a way to interact with the external environment. So, input or output devices help you to interact with the external devices, meaning that it helps you to communicate in terms of communication and all that. It helps you do that. So, anything that is about the interaction with the external environment, the input or output devices helps you to do that. And that also can be in the form of humans and all that. So if you want to communicate or interact with um, external environment, you need the input or output devices for that. So the architecture usually includes input or output interfaces. Input or output interfaces. Hardware that connects the CPU to external devices like USB controllers, network interfaces, and etc. So when we talk of input or output interfaces, it is the hardware is the hardware that connects the CPU to external devices. So, example, the USB controllers and the network interfaces, and we have a whole lot of them. But I just gave two over here. And we talk of the input or output models or controllers. They manage data flow between CPU and peripheral devices. So they manage the data that flows through the CPU and the peripherals. When we talk of peripheral devices are devices that are not um, part of the computer. So they are like external devices that you add to the computer. So when we talk of input or output instruction, we are talking of special CPU instruction to read from or write to input or output ports. So these are the instructions where the CPU instructions read from or write to input or output ports. So when we talk of input or output techniques, we are talking of programmed input or output techniques where the CPU directly controls the input or output operation by issuing instructions to input or output devices. The CPU waits until the operation is done. Then we are talking of the second technique is the interrupt driven input or output. technique, where the CPU starts an input or output operation and continue doing other works. So it starts the operation but also continues with other works. So when the input or output completes, devices send an interrupt signal to the CPU. So it sends a signal to the CPU whenever it completes an input or output um, operation. The third one is direct memory access. The the acronym is DMA, which is a DMA controller moves data directly between memory and input output devices. So the DMA controller, it moves data between the memory. So whenever a data is passing between the memory and the input or output devices, it is the DMA controller that does all that and frees CPU from involvement in large data transfers. So whenever you are transferring a large data, it also frees the CPU from getting involved in large data transfers. So input or output addressing, two common approaches. We have the memory mapped input or output. So where devices have specific addresses in the same address space as memory. And we have an isolated input or output, which is can also call it the port mapped input or output, where separate address space for input or output access with special instructions like IN. Importance of what? Input or output in architecture. So the importance, or you can say the benefits or the advantages, determines how fast and efficient the computer can interact with the outside world. So the one importance of input and output in architecture, it helps to determine whether the computer can interact with the outside world very fast. So if it can interact with the outside world slow, fast, or medium range, with the help of the input or output, you can determine that critical for performance in systems that handle large data input or output like servers, multimedia systems, and real-time systems. So critical performance in systems that can handle, yes. So it also helps in critical performances in systems that can handle large. So whenever you are handling large data, the input or output in architecture can help you that. So summary, input and output in architecture involves the hardware and techniques that let the CPU communicate with the external devices. It includes everything from keyboard and monitors to network cards and storage devices managed through input or output controllers, interact systems, and all. So this is the summary. So whatever I spoke about, I've summarized everything here. So I think this is the end of our presentation. Thank you.